Hello, Australia. Welcome to the Layback Podcast. It's episode number 4, and I filmed this one so you can head over to YouTube and find it there. If you're having trouble finding it, head over to thelayback.com and you'll find some links where you can get to it. The Tokyo 2020 Games are coming up fast, and in this episode, I interview Olympic hopeful Lucy Stirling. She's one of Australia's top competition climbers and currently Oceanic lead champion. Lucy is from Brisbane, Queensland, and she's been climbing since she was 13. She quickly found success in competition climbing, taking her to multiple youth world lead championships. In 2014, Lucy became Australian Open lead champion, and in 2017, Australian Bouldering Champion. On the international scene, Lucy represented Australia at the World Games in Poland in 2017 and has competed at multiple Open World Cups. Lucy was down here in Victoria to train for speed climbing about a month ago, and we sat down to talk about her climbing life and the path ahead of her to get to Tokyo in 2020. We cover Lucy's progress through climbing and the successive challenges she's faced throughout her competition climbing career. We get into how she trains, traveling for comps, outdoor climbing, and those other non-climbing things that we have in life. Let's get into it. Let's get off. All right. What I want to know is, where were you when you first found out that climbing was going to be in the Olympics 2020?
Well, I don't remember exactly when I knew it was going to be in the Olympics. I remember the time when we were all thinking that it would be, and it was a prospect to be in the Olympics. And I remember talking to the family I was staying with at the time, and they were like, if you go to the Olympics, you have if the Olympics happen, you have to go. And I was like, yeah, this is something I really want to do. Yeah. And when it was decided that it was a part of the invitational sports, I was like, okay, this is a goal that I can, it's a very possible thing that I can do.
It was pretty immediately obvious that you kind of wanted to do it, or was it a decision that you had to grapple over at all, or was it like, no, I'm going?
Well, I've always wanted to compete at the highest level in my chosen sport, and climbing is, I love it. And I've been to sort of the World Games, and that was a big moment for me. I was really excited because I was one of 12 athletes, competing with these amazing people. And it's like, who wouldn't want to compete at the highest level in the sport? It's really exciting, and it's a huge new challenge, even just the journey getting there. So, yeah.
And what's the journey for you? What does it look like? How do you qualify for 2020?
It's quite the journey. There's 3 different ways of getting in. There's a qualifying event in Toulouse, and I'm pretty sure you have to qualify through the World Championships this year in Tokyo to get into the Toulouse qualifying event. And then each continental championship is also another qualifying event. So for Australians and Oceanic climbers, our Oceanic event would be the best pathway to the Olympics. Okay, because they get, if I understand correctly, they get to one person from male and female competitors, or the winner, I guess, of the Oceanic. Yeah, so one male and one female from the Continental Championships allowed to go. Unless someone does really well at the Toulouse or in the World Championships, then 2 can go. So the winner of Oceania and also whoever does really well at Toulouse.
Okay. When's Toulouse? Do you know when?
I can't remember.
Is it next year, or because the Olympics are next year now, if you think about it, right? We're only 18 months away.
Yeah, it's very close. So the Australian Nationals will be the qualifying event for Oceania, and then Oceania will be the qualifying event for the Olympics, and the Oceanic Championships will be in early 2020. Okay. So it's all very close to the Olympic Games, which is generally what they do now. They make it closer and closer to the event to make sure that the athletes are the best athletes that they could send over, I think. Yeah.
So whoever does get in won't have a lot of time between winning or knowing that they're going to the Olympics and actually going. It might be, 4 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in a way, everyone that's trying to get to the Olympics has to assume they're going to actually make it. You just have to have that confidence, I think. You've got to assume you're going, and then if you don't go, then that's it.
No.
But yeah.
You've got to start with the end goal in mind and work backwards.
For sure. I think so.
Okay. So, all right, let's get back to the beginning. You're originally from Queensland. I mean, how did you discover climbing up there?
Well, I grew up doing mountain biking and gymnastics, and then when I decided gymnastics wasn't my thing, there was a climbing wall at the gymnasium that I was training at in the school that I went to.
Okay.
And I've often decided that I wanted to go climbing on that wall instead of to training at gymnastics.
And so you were like there for gymnastics training and getting distracted by the climbing wall.
Totally. Yeah, 100%.
That's awesome.
Or I would just not turn up to training at gymnastics and be climbing on the wall, hoping that I'd get away with it. And then my coach would be like, you were climbing when you were supposed to be training. And I was like, well, sorry.
Did you know what you were doing on the wall? I mean, did they have specific problems laid out, or were you just kind of messing around?
It's just like this. No, it's a climbing wall that they have at the school. They have climbing sessions.
So it's actually an organised thing at the school. Like they did climbing.
Yeah. It wasn't like it was like a co-curricular sport that you could go and do after school, and that was when I was supposed to be training gymnastics. And I think I just in that moment I discovered that I really enjoyed climbing, and it was something that I would really love doing. I did like gymnastics, but I found it hard to fit in a little bit, and
why is that?
Yeah, I didn't enjoy gymnastics as much as I enjoyed climbing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't... Artistic gymnastics is very much... I always wanted to be a male gymnast.
Okay.
At that time, because you didn't have to do the, the airy-fairy, poses between the exercises. I wanted to be the athlete that does the tumbling and the bar, but
the cool
stuff without the, fairy stuff.
And do you think you saw that opportunity in climbing, or?
Not really. I think I got sick of gym, and then I went to climbing and loved it. I went to my father, who was actually Australian. He was part of the Australian gymnastics team, and he competed at the Commonwealth Games. So I felt I put a bit of self-pressure on, and thought I had to live up to him. But he never put the pressure on me, but I was like, Dad, I want to quit gym. And he was actually really relieved, which was quite the shock to me. But I think, it was a good transition.
He took you to a climbing gym, and it was...
Yeah, so then I went... So there was the school climbing wall that I started on, and then I wanted something more, because it's a small wall, but it was, a good start.
Did it have ropes on it? Yeah, maybe we need to flesh out what this actual school climbing wall was, because I'm imagining it just being this dinky little wall with old holds in the corner.
No, it was like a tall wall in like a basketball stadium. And the funny thing is, there's a story behind this. My dad, who he's an architect, and he designed the whole stadium, the whole gymnasium.
Gymnasium, yeah.
Before I was born, and asked and opted for them to put in a climbing wall before I was even thought of. And sure enough, it was what introduced me to climbing, which is, my life now. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
It's like a little moment in time where it could have gone one way or the other.
Yeah, but I'm probably sure I would have found climbing anyway. But we went then down to the local climbing gym, Rock Sports in the valley, and there was the junior squad, which I had to wait a couple of months before I was old enough to join. But once I could, I was there like 3 times a week when I was 12 or 13, and then there for the next 5 years, and then...
So how did you end up participating in your first competition? Was it just a part of that youth squad?
Yeah, it was. To be honest, competitions in sport is something I grew up with, and so it was just seemed logical.
Yeah,
that was the next step. It sort of is a way of setting goals and challenges for me, and I've always loved competing because it's a way of challenging yourself. And yeah, I grew up doing mountain bike races and gymnastics comps, and so it just seemed logical that we'd try the climbing comps.
It sounds like you have a competitive drive there. Where do you think that comes from?
I don't know.
Have you got brothers and sisters, or
yeah,
a lot?
My older brother's a pilot, and my sister is a town planner.
Okay,
but I've never felt really competitive against them at all. Ever.
No, you guys didn't grow up competing in board games or just made up competitions around the house or anything like that?
Nothing like. No, not really. I mean, I've always just loved competing against myself. Like, I've always done individual sports. I mean, I did soccer at one stage, or Oz kick or something, but I love being able to rely on myself and push myself to its limits rather than, letting other people down or worrying about that.
Yeah.
I like setting, pushing myself and discovering my own boundaries. And
so as an individual sport, climbing kind of appealed to you, I guess, in that sense. Then,
for sure. Yeah. It's very different in the way that you can push yourself in every way, shape and form.
You don't have to really worry, is anyone else, you're not letting down a team or anything. It's kind of you focus on yourself. And
exactly.
Yeah. Fair enough. So can you take us through your early experiences with competition climbing? You got to go to the Youth World Climbing Championships at one stage. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I did 3 World Youth. I did 1 in Youth A and 2 in the junior category.
Okay.
So my first Youth A competition was at Edinburgh in Scotland.
Yeah.
And it was in 2010, and I was also doing high school at the time.
So how old were you then? Were you 15, 16 or something?
18.
18.
17 or 18, I think. I don't know where I went.
So so juniors is up until you get to a certain age, and then youth A is what, 17, 18? Is it
Yeah, something like that. I think juniors 18. I think I was even turning 19 in the last year.
Okay.
Yeah. So first year was in Edinburgh in Scotland, and then the second year was where was it? Oh, it was in Austria, in Innsbruck. Oh, Imst, sorry.
Imst, okay.
Imst in Austria. And then last one was in Singapore, which was the hottest and most sweatiest competition I've ever done. It even rained, and the competition had to stop because it was so gross.
It's just too much humidity.
Well, the humidity was one part, but then it started raining and the wall leaked, and then they decided they needed to stop the competition because the walls were too wet.
So at Edinburgh, that was your first one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so my mum and dad and my brother came along. And my coach came along as well at the time, Rob Perra.
It's from Rock Sports?
Yeah, from Rock Sports. Yeah. And so I had quite the supportive team. And there was
an entourage,
it was more Australian team as well there. And I remember I was so nervous going up to it. I remember driving in the car towards towards the gym on the first day of qualifiers, and my arms were so like lead. They were just shaking, and I think the first qualifier was terrible. I was really nervous and I was pumped before I even got on the wall.
Yeah.
But I think the second qualifier was a lot better, and I think in all, the whole competition was just a huge eye-opener to the level of competition, and girls my age doing incredible climbing at that age, and it was like I'd never sort of experienced anything like it before.
Yeah, like how hard are those competition climbs? I mean, can you even grade them or?
They can. Generally, I can't remember what they grade the youth ones, but now they're around 27, 28 minimum.
Okay.
So
quite hard.
Very hard, especially to like onside or flash.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. And so were they harder in the world competition than what they would have been in the local competition? Or?
For Australia local competition, definitely.
Yeah.
At that time, the route setting was really different. So a lot of the climb is really hard at the start, and with Australia competitions, they like to let you at least get to the first clip, and then it gets harder at that stage. So it's more like a warm awakening to the climb. Whereas in World Cups and even in the World Youth, they have a harder start, and
it's like a boulder start problem, and then it goes into a little bit easier.
Yeah. So in the Open World Cup, I think the youth, they were usually a little bit less mean, but especially in my first Open World Cup, it was a huge eye opener, because the start of the climb was like a boulder problem. It was just like basically the route setter's brutal way of saying, look, the people that don't get through the start crux don't belong here, and that's just getting rid of that field. Like, you've got the start crux, it eases off, and then it gets harder generally. And that was hard for my first Open World Cup, but yeah. I think I got through it, which was lucky.
Bit of a baptism of fire.
Yeah.
So you were nervous at that first, like international youth. How did you deal with that? Like, how did that progress over time?
I think I realized to get better at these competitions, I needed not only to train my strength and everything, it was more I needed experience at that level. And a lot of the Europeans, you could see that they just had experience. They go to these competitions every weekend, and it's like that just becomes second nature to them.
So they're really calm at the event.
Yeah, it's like how I would feel at my local competition.
Yeah.
They felt just as natural in
they
that
had home
environment.
ground advantage kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like that. So I was like, okay, what I need to do is I need to go to more of these international competitions, and that way I can get better.
And that's what you did.
And that's what I tried to do, yeah. That's exactly what I did.
Was it challenging to kind of transition from like youth to open competitions?
Yeah, I think it was a whole nother ball game as well. Like from Australia comps to youth, and then youth to opens was huge as well. It was massive. The difference, and the field as well is so much stronger. It's just like, these are the best people in the world. It's not just the best youth, it's the best in the world, and you've got all ages, all shapes and sizes. It's intimidating.
Yeah.
But
so what would be the youngest at the Open?
16, yeah.
16
years of age. And I think you get some athletes that are really, that have just come out of all the youth competitions or still competing in the youth competitions, like Yanya Gambre, and she's like winning all the youth, and then she just comes along and like wins all the opens. And you get a few of those. But for me, it was just huge, a big difference from the youth to the opens as well.
Mental challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like, you focused on lead climbing first, right? And that was something you kind of progressed out of youth, and you went in to start competing for the Australian like lead nationals.
Yeah. So becoming Australian lead champion was always a dream of mine, and I think from I think the progression of when I started, I did top rope climbing and lead climbing at all the local competitions. And then I didn't even know if there was really a youth bouldering championship. It was always lead for me.
Lead, yeah.
And a lot of people at the gym did do bouldering as well, or they focused on bouldering. But for me, it was just lead. And that was what I was good at.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple more boulder, like as years went on, there were more boulder comps coming on, and I just tried them out because they looked fun, and it was climbing. So, and then I loved it, and the next dream was to become, Australian Bouldering Champion.
Well, let's go back to the lead climbing for a minute. In 2014, you make your way down here to Melbourne to compete in the Australian lead national comp, and you have a head cold.
Yeah. So to put this in picture, this is my dream. I've done really well in all the youth competitions in Australia, and then my dream is to become Australian lead champion in opens. And I've been training really hard for this, like harder than I've ever trained before. And sure enough, the week before I get sick, and I was pretty devastated, but I spent the weekend trying to get better. And then I've already booked my flights, so I decided I'd go anyway, and hoping that I'd feel better for the day of the comp, but I really didn't. And I remember waking up the day of the comp and being like, oh my God, I actually don't think I can do this. I'm really sick.
Just like your head all
my
grogged
throat,
up, and your throat's really...
It was really bad. And I was like, whatever, I'll just go to the comp and maybe climb. And anyway, so I went there, and then sure enough, like, it was a really tough field. Like, Andrea Hart turned up, and I was like, I've never competed against Andrea. It was scary, and I was up against really strong competitors. And I remember talking to Alex on the phone, and I'm like, I actually don't think this is going to happen. Like, this is ridiculous to think that I'm even going to, make semi-finals, let alone do anything else. And he was like, just do it anyway. Just take it easy and climb, and just, you've done training, just compete and you'll be right, and see what happens. And anyway, so I slept for most of the time that I was there, and did a little bit of warm-up, and then did my first 2 qualifier routes and did surprisingly well. I'm not sure where I came, but I made it to semi-finals. And then I think I slept in isolation for semi-finals in this pile of everybody else's downies, trying to make me get better and stay warm in the cold Melbourne weather. And then I got on my semi-finals route, and I think I came second in the qualifying for the finals. So I was like, okay, I'm actually climbing better than I expected. Hopefully I'll feel better the next day. And I did. Yeah. I felt a lot better for the day of the finals.
Because the finals usually on a Sunday, right? Like, you do the qualifiers and the semi on the Saturday, and then Sunday is...
I think so. It's sometimes they do the qualifiers and then the semi-finals and finals. And it might have been that.
Okay.
So I can't exactly remember. But
you did have a head cold.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, that's fair enough. You can't remember, like, exactly.
I can't remember at all, but I remember the semi-finals route. My throat was, I just thinking on the route, what am I doing? My throat is screaming at me. And then I focused on the climb. But then finals was, I don't actually remember the finals route, but I remember doing really well and then coming down. And then because I'd only come second, I think Kumari was after me. And she didn't make it as far, or made it to the hole just below me. And I was like, my dream had come true. And it was like, I'd become Australian champion. It was one of the happiest moments, but I was also really sick. And I was like, oh, this is so odd. Yeah, it was pretty cool though.
It was a bit of a confidence boost to know, like, that you could still perform really well despite, the illness.
For sure. I think was a huge confidence boost to know that all the training I'd done paid off despite my illness. Like I think I was improving by the end of it, but yeah, I'd done enough training. I was psyched.
Getting back to bouldering, you did focus on lead climbing first.
Yeah.
Bouldering wasn't like a huge thing back like when you first started around 2010? Or?
No, not really. Not for me at least. All the comps were really lead. There were probably only a few boulder comps.
Okay.
There weren't, even in Brisbane, there weren't really that many bouldering gyms. Only recently Urban's opened like a whole 3 gyms.
3 more. Yeah.
So bouldering wasn't that big for me. It was always lead or top rope, and then I went to one of the bouldering competitions. There was an Australian climbing festival in Katoomba, and it was also Australian Bouldering Nationals, and I decided I'd compete, and I'd obviously trained for it, but I did a lot better than I expected, and I think I placed 3rd. And from then my goal was to get better and better each year and eventually make it to Australian National Champion for bouldering. And it was my weakness, and I've always wanted to get better at my weakness so that I can become the best climber I could possibly be. So bouldering was the next step, and yeah.
And so that kind of progressed to you did a lot better at bouldering.
Yeah, and so from that point I did a lot of lead and a lot of boulder, and it was kind of, I was doing both, and it was more of a balance, and it's almost tipping now more bouldering. I think that's just because I've got 2 bouldering World Cups coming up, but definitely most of my training is bouldering, mainly because my fitness for lead is quite good. So the training I do for lead climbing only has to be a short period of time before the lead comp. So I do most of my strength building with bouldering. And I get a lot stronger doing all the hard moves. And then when it comes closer to the lead season, I'll just do, depending on what comp it is, I'll do maybe a month or like even 2 weeks of just like fitness training with like getting pumped on the wall. Yeah. But with experience at the lead comps, and each year it gets easier and easier to train for or to transition. So I can do more bouldering and cut that lead preparation shorter each time.
After your successes in Australia with winning the Australian National Lead Championships, you get the opportunity to go on and compete internationally on like the World Cup circuit.
Yeah, so it was quite a transition from, I kind of knew it would be a whole new ball game overseas, but I had come from winning a whole lot of competitions and doing really well to a whole new field and competing against the best in the world. And it was quite the eye-opener because not only is the field bigger, but all of the climbs are very different. The holds are different. Everything's different. So the route setting, and it really made me think about how much, like what training I need to do. And not only did I need to get stronger at home, but I needed to be exposed to these competitions more, and I needed to be training on these holds more. I remember one competition where I fell off because this hold, it was the first time they'd included dual texture, and I was like horribly frustrated because I'd come off on this route on a dyno to a dual text sloper, and so I dynoed to this thing and it was slippery on one side, and I didn't realise because I'd never been exposed to that hold before.
You'd never seen a dual?
I'd never seen it. And so I grabbed it and slipped off it completely.
Oh, this is a bit frustrating.
Yeah, but other people that knew about the hold knew that where the grippy part was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of going overseas internationally, like in the past kind of, 4 years, you've progressively just been going out like more and more to these international competitions?
Yeah. So the first year of my Open World Cups, I did to in France, and my parents came along, and it was really cool. It was big experience, and then I realized I needed to do more. So the next year, I think I went overseas with Campbell Harrison, and we went and did 2 months overseas doing as many of the lead World Cups as possible. I think may have done a boulder as well, I'm not sure. And that was really good because at that stage I needed as much experience at these World Cups as I could. I needed to get used to being at that level and competing on these holds and on this style of route setting. And as I do more and more, I'm changing how I go about my travels, and because nowadays I do less competitions back to back, because when you go over and do the whole World Cup circuit, it's like you're tapering for each competition, and you don't get the chance to get stronger. So you get stronger for the first comp, and then you taper for the next one, and then taper, and then you end up losing a bit of strength by the end. Okay. So for me to reach one of my goals of making semi-finals and really stepping up that bar, I think I need to pick and choose my competitions and really train for each one, because now I've got the experience I have at, the mental side of things and the type of holds and the route setting. I know what I'm dealing with, but I can pick and choose rather than needing that experience.
So what does training look like for you on a week-to-week basis?
So at the moment I do a lot of bouldering training. So my first 2 World Cups are in China, and they're Boulder World Cups. So mainly my training at the moment is just bouldering and strength-based activities, and also speed climbing stuff, because I really need to work on speed climbing. And it's actually the speed climbing training, the explosive power is really helping my bouldering training. Okay. So from week to week, I do generally on the weekends I have 1 rest day and then a bouldering session, which is fun, like a fun but still hard.
And you have a bouldering session on your rest day?
No. So I have one day of the weekend, I have a rest day, and then the second day I'll have, whichever day it is, I'll have a boulder session. And that's usually my fun boulder session. I still train hard, but it's it's fun and it's just bouldering. And then about 3 days a week, depending on whether it's a hard week or an easier week, I do 2 to 3 hours of hard bouldering each session. And then I also do strength training after that, whether it be like finger strength, like weighted hangs or weighted pull-ups or antagonist exercises. On my full training days, I sometimes do 3 sessions a day. So hang
on, 3 sessions a day?
Yeah.
And like 3 hours each, or?
No, so they're generally, the biggest session will be 2 to 3 hours, and then it could be like an hour session, or an hour and a half or something. Okay. But I go to QAS, the Queensland Academy of Sport, twice a week, and do, at the moment we're just focusing our training on explosive power, so I do sprints with them and lots of jumping and just, powerful stuff. Yeah. And that's twice a week. And then I also train with Frank, at Urban Climb, and he does a lot of other antagonist and also climbing specific strength-based activities, and that's all amongst the other climbing sessions that I do. So
how many hours a week does that end up being?
I haven't really ever calculated it.
Okay.
It'll be around, actually I have no idea, sorry.
But it's pretty much full-time job.
Yeah, full time. So
do you work outside of training at all, or do you have
so I work in a casual job in a cafe. It's called Soul Breads. Yeah. And I've been there for 6 years.
You work for Kim Carrigan.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Small world.
Well, they've just changed owners recently. Yeah. But it was yeah, it's been a long haul there. I love it though. It's a great cafe, and they always have me back after my long, bouts overseas. They're like, yeah, come back and give me the same shifts. So that's why I've been there for so long. It's just such a lovely environment.
And you can work it around all the climbing training and everything.
For sure. And then I also do some personal coaching at Urban Climb.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And that helps bring it all together. So it sounds like maybe every week isn't kind of like that similar, or how does it fit into like a bigger macro cycle for what you're working towards?
So I periodize my training. I work backwards from each competition and say I'd easy week, hard week, or easy week, medium week, hard week, and kind of alternate it so that I'm getting a rest and then building up and then resting and then building up and resting. Sometimes it's more methodical than others, and sometimes I just have to listen to my body. And over the years, I've really changed my training and my program up a lot. And because I coach myself, and I have for a very long time, I have had to formulate my training from what information is out there and from other sources. And so at the moment, I got back from Japan last year from a big training stint with a coach, and he said we did training for like 5 hours at a time, and there would be a lot of rest, but we'd do 5-hour-long sessions, and they were intense and they were great, but I couldn't really replicate that when I came back home, just because I've got to balance work, and by the end of 5-hour session, if I'm by myself, it's really hard to put focus into each exercise. Like after 3 hours, I'm done, and I don't want to, if there's no one there to prod me along, I'm like, I'm going home. I want to eat. I need to eat food. And so at the moment, I'm trying something different, and I mix up my training, and I do 3-hour session, go home, eat, come back later, and then do, a bit of strength, go away, and then do maybe QAS later, or train on the woody downstairs at Milton with, the urban crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you find kind of splitting it up into 2 sessions in the day helps you maintain focus a bit better in each one?
Yeah, at the moment that's really working well for me, because I can also fit it around work, and it's just, better.
And so it sounds like you've kind of had some coaching here and there, and a lot of it's self-directed. So there hasn't been like a constant coach or someone along there the whole way. You kind of had to learn as you go.
No, for the first 5 years, I was coached by Rob Perra at Rock Sports, and then after that, it's just been. I went to Sydney actually for a year and was coached by Rob and Carly LeBreton. And they were the Australia team coaches at the time, and so they were really influential in my career as well. And then after that, it's just been, because they're in Sydney and I'm in Brisbane, I've just self-coached, and with a lot of outside influence and help. So I, ask a lot of coaches that have coached me in the past, or people, or the Australian team coaches at the moment, I ask for help, and the internet, Google, everything
so
I can get,
what are your, because there's a lot of sources out there like these days, right? Heaps of training information. Yeah. Are there any particular like training philosophies that you come across that you kind of felt apply to you and have worked for you at all?
Yeah, there's some like finger strength exercises, like weighted hangs, and the specifics of that is just so broad. Like everybody thinks they know exactly what is the right thing to do, and I'm sure there is a couple that are, and it's just about figuring out what does work for you. And I think testing is a really good way of doing that. So making sure that you are seeing progress and writing down the numbers of it. And if this works, and if you're getting better, then keep at
doing it. Yeah.
And if you start to plateau, maybe change something.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think it's really important to have a program that's adaptable and Yeah.
Because when the average person who's maybe climbing outdoors, climbing is like probably a smaller part of their life than it is for yours, and they're not trying to build up for competitions. I imagine they approach it a little bit differently, and their sources on the internet are probably different, but you have to pursue kind of the top level stuff, right? Because you can pursue it almost full time. So whereas other people like, I need to maximize this 2 hours. You're like, well, I got time. And you can just throw it at it.
Yeah. I've sort of adapted my lifestyle for climbing and for my training. And I think if I was training for a specific route, like outdoors, then I would replicate it on a woody or something. And if I needed to improve my grip strength, I would be really specific about it. But for competition climbing, you don't know the route you're going to be on. And I'm not only training for lead climbing, I'm training for bouldering and speed. So it's like, at the moment, it's a bit overwhelming with the amount I need to fit into my training, because I have to get more explosive. I have to get better at slopers. I need more grip strength and everything. And I think it's important to just select 2 of your biggest weaknesses, or a couple of your biggest weaknesses, focus on them for a few months, see the gains in that, and then move on. Yeah. And you've been here in Melbourne working speed climbing quite a lot in the last few weeks. Yeah, speed and boulder at the moment.
At Boulder.
Yeah. So I've been traveling to Melbourne every fortnight, or almost, and focusing on speed, and just because the only wall is in Melbourne, and there's one in Sydney as well, but I've been coming to Melbourne and going speed one day and then boulder next, or 2 days of speed. And I've just decided, because there's 2 competitions on this last weekend and this weekend, and a speed training camp, I decided to come for 2 weeks and train with Ocean Campbell and the crew.
Yep.
And it's been awesome. I've just sort of let my training program just to the side a bit, and just trained with some other people. I think that's really important when you do train with other people, to try out their program.
Yeah.
And it opens your eyes to what they do, and might make you realize some of the things that you're missing out of your program.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good exercise in just something different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get caught up in everything you're doing.
How do you feel about the speed route and its inclusion? Because, I mean, you've pursued bouldering, you've pursued lead, and now you've got to add speed into that mix.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 sides of it. Like, I don't think anybody that wanted to be doing the Olympics really is happy about all 3 of them being in at once. No one that I've talked to anyway, because they're very different sports. And speed climbing is like sprinting compared to marathon running compared to chess or something. It's like not quite. It's very different. And it'll make the Olympics quite interesting when it comes to the competitors and who's at that level in all 3.
With training for the speed route, do you feel like it takes away from other things though that you'd like? Because, I mean, if you're training for one thing, you're sacrificing recovery capacity, right, for something else.
Yeah, to a degree, yeah, definitely. But there's only so much bouldering I can do. And given my fingertips at the moment, you can
They're
really
a bit
see
red
that.
raw.
They're red raw.
Yeah, Lucy showed me her fingertips before. They're as about as raw as they get.
Yeah.
You're on the last little sliver of skin there, I think.
Yes, I've had to tape them, mummify them today to actually get on the speed route. But in a way, I'm enjoying speed at the moment, because it's like trying out a new sport. And I'm progressing really quickly, which is great, but it's also quite monotonous, and it's very different to lead and boulder, so I don't find it as engaging, but I do enjoy it. Yep. And in a way, it definitely helps my bouldering, because I've been doing explosive power, and that's one of my weaknesses in bouldering, is like dynos. So training for speed, I think, is helping in in theory, it's helping my bouldering, so I'm hoping it actually does.
Speaking of bouldering, one thing I wanted to ask you about was, like, as we watch these competitions more and more, because we can, they're all on the internet so much these days, right? There appear to be a lot more of these parkour style bouldering problems.
Yeah, I love it.
You like it?
To a degree. Like the run and jumps, I get pretty scared at running in a wall. But generally I'm getting a bit better. But I really enjoy them. They're, big volumes and it's pretty cool. It's better than, I think, just the one style of burly hard climbing where you've got
small holds.
I think they're really mixing it up and playing with shapes, and it's really like dancing up the wall. You see people getting in really awkward positions, and it's like an obstacle course. Yeah. And how do you train for that then? If it's because it's not like, it doesn't seem strength based or so how do you make that? Experience. I think just like bouldering constantly, and I think you have a huge advantage if you're training on the holds that are in the competition. So another point of going to all the competitions and doing as much experience as you can. Also, another angle of that is the holds, is getting familiar with the holds, because if you know a hold and you have to jump to it, then you know whether it's going to be a jug or it's going to be dual texture. And you're like, okay, I know what I'm grabbing. It's going to be easier if I know. So
do any competition climbers sit there at night on the internet looking at like Kilter Grip's website, like, oh, what do these holds look like?
Definitely.
Really?
Yeah, I do it.
So you're looking at the holds on the internet to see, like, what do they look like?
Yeah, well, I think if I don't know a set of holds, generally I kind of look it up and hope that a gym around me has them, and then would like to, even just the comp I didn't know a bunch of holds, and I was just really excited to train on them just to get a feel, because I hate being sprung with new holds at a competition. I can totally understand that. Do you think that climbers in Australia are maybe at a little bit more of a disadvantage there because we don't get as many international holds? It's probably improved in recent years, but definitely beforehand. I think now we're pumping in a whole lot of all the new ones we seem to be getting, especially like all the bouldering gyms really like to get in new holds. As expensive as they are, they're like, it's cool. And it helps you guys when you go overseas and you're actually used to seeing these holds and you're used to climbing on them. Definitely.
What about like mental capacity for climbing? Like, do you have any, you talked about getting as much experience in competitions as you can for that mental aspect. Are there any other things you do for mental training?
When I was in Japan, they took me through meditation. We actually went to a really, really old temple, and I got beaten by a stick by this monk while I was sitting in this temple trying to meditate. And if you like look like you're about to fall asleep, he like whack you with a stick, and it wasn't like light at all. It was hard. But anyway, sorry, that's not quite what you asked. But yes, I do a bit of meditation. I'm not as strict with it as I should be, but I think mental training is something that I'm still working on, and generally experience is something that's really helping, just getting used to comps. And
that's kind of like the best thing you find?
Yeah.
So have you had many injuries along the way? Like, have you had to deal with any injuries through your competition climbing career?
Yeah, a couple. I had a couple of bicep tears, nothing serious, but yeah. and I had a cyst in my wrist at one point, and I think it was like progressive overload from...
You can cause a cyst in your wrist from progressive overload?
I guess sometimes. I'm not quite sure how they come about, but I got one, and that was unfortunate. But it's something that I could climb with. It was still painful, but I could deal with it.
Yeah.
And so it meant that I didn't deal with it for a while.
Yep.
And when I eventually did, I got injected with cortisone and it took about 8 months to heal properly, but I still competed in that time. I think I did my first Oceanic competition in New Caledonia, which I won, which which is really cool. But that was of course after I'd improved a lot from my wrist injury. A couple of bicep tears along the way, but nothing that has taken more than like a couple of months to heal.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is that a pretty good run by like competition standards?
For sure. Yeah. But I'm very cautious and I know my body pretty well. And if something's hurting, I back off. I'm not very stupid about training. If my fingers hurt, I stop or give it a week. Sometimes, I like to say I am, but sometimes I get a bit over the top and I get niggles quite often. But I see a physio once a week now. I have a new sponsor. You got a physio sponsor? Yeah, physio sponsor. And it's Revive Ashgrove. And they treat me. I used to go see a physio every now and then because, but once I found Julie, she's amazing. She fixes it straight away, and I see her once a week, and she fixes every niggle so that I don't actually get the injury.
So you're just kind of like flirting with injury, like at the edge all the time, or? Probably.
It's hard to know whether you're on the edge of an injury or not sometimes. But generally, Jules will just tell me if I need to back off as well. So recently I've had really sore calves from doing all the jumping and explosive sprints and stuff from speed training. And she basically said, look, you're going to tear your Achilles if you don't back off now. And so she spent the afternoon sticking needles in there. And so I've come close many times, but generally I've got enough support behind me that I can recognize when I've got an injury and
when it's time to back off.
Yeah.
I read about another challenge that you took on in 2017. You wrote about on your blog. You're pretty open about that you had to, I guess, cycle off, or you chose to cycle off medication for ADHD that you'd been on for a long time.
Yeah, I had been on the medication for ADHD since I was really young. And the medication was never a problem. I'm really grateful that I actually had it, that mum and dad put me on it, and it's got me to where I am today. But I never really came off it at any point in that time. And I think when I talked to my doctor, the doctor at the time, he was saying that most people kind of go off it every now and then just to balance it out, and I never did. I didn't know it was something I was supposed to do. But so I was constantly on this medication and it was fine, but coming off it was something I'd need to do at that point. And in 2017 I realized, look, if I want to go to the Olympics, Japan don't allow medication at all, like the dexamphetamine they don't allow in Japan.
And so they don't allow it in Japan?
No, with no exceptions. So
not even for the Olympics they wouldn't allow it?
No. So every year that I compete, my mum, to begin with, she would organise it for me and send in a prescription and get it approved by ASADA, and it's quite a arduous process to do each year, but and I'd of course have to take these drugs with me everywhere, and if I didn't have them then it was a serious problem for me. Like, it wasn't a health like problem, but for me it was going to be really hard to get by.
It was a mental health problem.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I wasn't going to die, but I was going to feel very out of place.
Yeah.
So I decided it was something that I wanted to get done one day. Like I wanted to wean myself off this medication, but I decided that because the Olympics were coming up, now was the time to get it done so that I have time to get used to competing without the medication and doing life without the medication. And so I decided in the end of, I think I started in November 2017, and it was really hard. Every time I slowly weaned off, so every time I dropped a tablet off, it felt like I had gone cold turkey. Like I went through, highs and lows, and I'm very tired all the time. I was, I think that might have helped my sleeping. Actually, I'm able to nap now.
Yeah, you're a pro sleeper now.
I'm a pro sleeper now, but I was constantly drained of energy, and I was really lucky to have really supportive family and Alex, and everyone was very supportive, but it was hard. Yeah, I got depressed sometimes, and I had to check in with my my specialist doctor, and he said be really careful because some people that wean off, they can suffer these effects, and if you don't, it can get worse. But it was generally just a short period of time that I suffered any sort of side effects of going off, but it took the whole year to feel 100%, I think.
How did it feel going into your first comp after coming off?
I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, as I usually do, because it was my first comp, and I wanted to be able to compete the same as I did on the medication, and I didn't want it to define me in a way. And I think it was the Queensland state lead, and I did pretty well. I think I came second, but I was really nervous. I was more nervous than I should have been for a state lead comp at that stage. I've been doing international comps for ages, so I was.
But you have been defending your state title as well, or?
Yeah, for sure.
So there's that pressure as well.
Yeah, and I think I was putting a lot of pressure on myself more to be able to keep my mind in a focused state. For that period of time.
Did you find that hard? Like, how did you do that? Did you just have to train yourself to?
I think I developed mechanisms to deal with focus.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as soon as I start thinking about focusing and trying to focus, then it usually makes me not focus.
It's like it slips out of your hands because you're trying to grip it too hard.
I can't think about anything because I'm gripping too hard.
Yeah.
So I try and forget that it's even a problem. And because I've developed what the medication has done is actually developed the pathways that would never have, they would have struggled to develop in the first place. Okay. So that's why the medication was beneficial, because once those pathways are in place, then once you come off them, they generally stay. Sometimes they don't, but I think I've been lucky in fact that most of them have stayed, and I have all these ways of coping, and it's easy. And I had they have a testing thing that I regularly go to when I was on the medication, and they test you when you're weaning off it as well.
Okay.
And it was interesting because when I went off the medication, I focused really hard on maintaining my focus on things, on certain tasks, and it actually meant that my test results in the brainwaves and everything were actually better than they were on the medication, which was really weird, but really cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
And I've heard that people talk about this idea of hyperfocus with ADHD. Can you relate to that, or do you think it's is it a myth, or is it?
No, 100% real.
100%?
Even as a kid, if you wanted to sit me down and read something that I had any interest in, then there was no hope. I'd get up and do something else.
Or like trying to convince you to do gymnastics.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, I loved gym. Like, it was great at the time. It was just that, you know, it wasn't.
Climbing was more interesting. Sorry to distract you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you could definitely focus on something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember Mum telling me stories about when I loved drawing. So she would get this pile of paper like this big and I'd just sit there for hours drawing. And like, I definitely had ADHD, but when it came to something I'm interested in, I could focus on it entirely. And that's what I think I do with my climbing as well, is that I love it and I just give it 100%, and that's what I focus on.
So you can like pull that focus. You kind of taught yourself to pull that focus to that.
For sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. Are there any other climbers with ADHD?
I have actually, since I posted that blog, there's a couple that have reached out to me and they're like, this is really amazing. Thank you for releasing this. And if you ever have someone, like, if you need someone to talk to, or can I talk to you? And it's really cool. There are a lot of people out there. So many kids have it. And yeah. How
do you maintain balance so that when you're climbing, you're performing well, but it doesn't take over your entire life?
So I like to do other things on the weekend. Sometimes on my rest days, sometimes I go surfing.
Okay.
I'm trying to learn how to surf, which is interesting. I get dumped by the waves a lot, but it's fun. It's just something different. Yeah. And I think having a balance is very important, because committing to something this big is really all-consuming and it can really mess with your head a bit. So I think if you've got something else to focus on, that's really helpful. A lot of people find they'll talk about studying and competing as a really good balance, and I tried that, but I failed uni, so I was decided I needed a break and to focus on one thing at a time. Okay. For me, I think work is a really good way of just getting outside of it and just spending time with family and friends and going mountain biking sometimes. I love I'm very sporty, so it's generally...
Do you have a non-sporty hobby at all? Like,
I like baking.
Okay.
And drawing. I really like painting, but yeah, mostly exercise in some form.
No, fair enough. Do you get to travel a lot as well, obviously? Do you find that it helps or hinders? I mean, is it a positive thing you get to travel, or is it sometimes a bit too much?
A bit of both. Like, traveling, of course, it's amazing to every year go overseas and see these amazing places, but a lot of what's beautiful about traveling you don't generally get to experience when you're competing with the ones you love. Like, what I love about traveling is being there with your best mate or your partner. But it makes it hard when you're going over these amazing places and doing really stressful things without that other person. It's a challenge and you get pretty homesick, but it's still really fun. Like, you meet other people and you make new friends, and so there's ups and downs. It can be quite hard, but it's also an incredible experience that I'd never regret.
Yeah. So will your partner, Alex, does he get to come along with you sometimes to the comps and stuff?
Yeah, for sure. He's come to quite a few, and even last year he came to Europe for a little while, and that was really awesome. It's really good to have him there, just as support. Yeah. And Mum and Dad have come to quite a few before, and it's really nice to have them there.
Yeah, he climbs as well, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. We met climbing.
Yeah.
And so after our competition, my competition last year, we went to Italy we were staying in Italy, and then we went climbing in Slovenia.
Okay.
and that was really cool.
What's climbing in Slovenia like?
It was really nice. It was like all climbing in Europe's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
We didn't have heaps of time. We had about a week, and it was really hot. So where we went, it was just we were trying to like jump from tree to tree because it was really exhausting. But yeah, I think we tried to get in early in the morning and then go back in the day and then come back at night.
Okay.
And I think the year before we went to Arco in Italy and we did the same thing. It was quite a hot time of the year, but the climbing in Arco is amazing. And what we'd do is we'd go out for an early morning session somewhere, go to a lake, because in Arco there's so many beautiful lakes, and then have a glass of wine by the lake and then have siesta back at home and then go for an evening session. It was like ideal. That was, if I could live life like that, it would be pretty good.
What about sponsorship? I look at professional climbers and I think, geez, that must be hard to like throw all of that in as well, because sponsorship's never simple. You know, you've got to produce content for your sponsors, photos, you've got to be on Instagram, and like all the pro climbers are getting on YouTube these days and they've got their own YouTube channels.
Yeah, it's like a job in itself.
Yeah.
I'm really lucky to have sponsors that are very easy to work with,
Yeah.
and they're very friendly and on good terms with them. So they're never overly demanding. They're quite helpful with the situation I've got. They're helping me. They're not burdening me with anything. Yeah. It's always helping. Yeah.
Yeah, they're helping you to try and achieve your goals.
Of course I've got to produce content for them, but I actually enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
So I do
it's not arduous. Like it
doesn't, I do a lot of writing and give it to some of my sponsors, and photos usually come with it, and Instagram's kind of at first Instagram was really hard to actually do, because you're like, oh, I feel weird putting myself out there and photos of me and content, but you get used to it and it's what people want to see, and even hearing people say it's like really inspiring just makes you want to do it, because you know that you're inspiring somebody and getting them up a wall or something.
And the feedback you get through that must be like, is that motivating as well?
For sure, yeah. It's really nice when you put something up and get lovely feedback or something.
So did you just studied after school, or was it just straight into climbing?
I studied part-time for as soon as I left school. I started exercise science and I loved it. I was really interested in doing it, except I had to defer the next part of that year because I was traveling and competing. And I also managed to fail one of my subjects. So I was only doing 2 subjects in the year. Yeah. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to take me like 10 years to get through this. And if I failed a subject, it's ridiculous. So I've decided for me, it's best to focus on climbing right now, because I'm not always going to be young. And when I want to stop competing as much, I think I'll move more into go back to study and commit to that and give that my full attention.
Yeah. I can imagine. One thing I recall from studying is that when you're not studying, you always feel like you should be. Yeah. And I imagine that's a hard stress for a competition climber to have there as well.
Yeah. Well, that's how I feel about climbing. When I'm not climbing, I feel like I should be. So
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. How do you stop yourself then, like from climbing more when you're not climbing? I mean, because you have to recover. Yeah.
Well, fingers for one, skin, and just knowing that you need rest. Yeah. Like rest, that is something I've discovered over experience, that it's just as important as the climbing. So if you don't rest enough, you're just going to start plateauing and then go downhill. So I pull myself back from doing too much. And yeah, sometimes if I'm having a really good session, I'll make the most of that. Yeah. And it could be a really long session, but then the next day I rest.
Okay.
Otherwise, the following session won't be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you do active resting? Do you actively like do you sleep like you train? Like, I'm going to sleep right now and I'm going to sleep so well.
Yes, actually, nowadays I do. For a long time, most of my life, I haven't been able to sleep during the day.
Yeah.
It's only at night, and I struggle to get to sleep. Whereas now it's like sleep when I can. So I get back from training, and generally I'll be very much tired enough to have a nap.
So you have like a midday nap before your Arvo session.
Yeah, and sometimes I have to set a timer, whether it be 10 minutes or like an hour. Sometimes I have like a 2-hour nap in the day, and that's a good day.
How much do you sleep? Like, how many hours sleep would you be getting a day? Yeah.
At night, it's 8 hours usually. I like to keep that consistent.
Yep.
Sometimes 7 hours if I've got work early or something.
Yeah.
But I don't nap heaps, but if I need to, I will. Yeah.
All right. So you climb indoors, like, and on plastic a lot, I guess, through competitions and so forth. I mean, with your goals for the future, totally makes sense. But you also enjoy climbing outdoors.
Yeah.
And in one interview I think I watched, you described them as two different sports. I guess I want to know, what do you see as being the major differences between the two?
They're different. They help each other for sure. Yeah. But I think I just think of outdoor climbing very much as a hobby, and I love it, and it's something that I could do for the rest of my life. Whereas competition climbing is a competitive sport for me. And I enjoy bouldering on the weekends sometimes just for fun, but it's what I'm challenging myself to do. It's the sport that I'm working towards. Whereas climbing outdoors is fun, and I can challenge myself for sure. And I love projecting routes and stuff, but it's more a hobby than, yeah.
So if you've got some spare time, you might project, or you might go on sighting or something, but like, you don't have kind of longer term goals for like hard red points at all?
I actually do. I think after, in a couple of years, I want to do more outdoor climbing and more like red pointing and trying to project routes. I think after I've had another couple of years of competition climbing,
like once you've had the focus on the Olympics, it's because it's kind of hard to that's so all consuming that
for
it doesn't
sure
really allow for much else.
And I think after that's happened, I think I need to have a break from indoor competitions. I probably won't. I might still do a couple, but I think I need to go outside and do what I love and project hard routes and travel and maybe if I've got money left.
True.
Yeah.
So getting back to Tokyo 2020, we're about 17 months out.
Yeah.
So what's the plan from here to there?
Okay, so I'm going to continue competing this year in as many international comps. So I'm doing China and China Boulder, and then do some lead World Cups in Europe, and then come back, continue training at home, and then do some more lead World Cups, maybe China and Japan at the end of the year.
Just a lot of flying around this year. Yeah,
super. But like I said before, it's like important to sort of choose the competitions and then come back and do a stint of training, I think, for me at the moment. And that way I can focus on all three at once. Yeah. And all three disciplines. Yep. And then I'll be able to do some Australian comps as well and come back for the Australian Nationals. Okay. I'm not actually sure when that's going to be either. So that might be... They haven't
announced that yet, no?
Not yet. So it might be after the World Cup season or between. So I have to keep that flexible. Okay. And then once I compete at Nationals, hopefully I qualify for the Oceanic competition in early 2020, and then once the top two will get from the top male and top female will then go to the Olympics from there. So at the moment I'm just trying really hard to get better at speed climbing because I'm really bad.
Yeah.
and
But how, because what did you post at the last speed and climbing comp? Like 19 seconds or something?
Yeah, so that was my first proper comp, I think, of speed climbing. Oh, no, I did Oceania the last year.
Okay.
But yeah, 18-19 was my last sort of record. Yeah. And I think the minimum time to qualify for the team is 15 seconds.
Okay.
And I've been working on that time. So I've been flying to Melbourne and doing training here, and in training I've got it down to 15.83 now.
So super close.
So really close. But then I just did a competition on the weekend and I did terribly. I did like 18 seconds again. So.
Do you have to get it? Does it have to, for it to be qualifying, does it have to happen in the competition?
I'd say so, yeah. I think it will be a bit unusual this year because we won't have Queensland won't have their qualifying speed event. I don't think they'll even have one because we don't have a speed climbing wall. So it would have to be special consideration, or I have to send in a letter. And so they'll base it off a number of different events or in training, or ask the speed coach if I'm actually legit doing okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I won't know until a little while.
Yeah. So you're going to do a bit more speed training over this year? Or?
Yeah, I'm going to continue training speed and then hopefully get to a position where I can compete overseas in it, and then hopefully that'll be by the end of the year in time for nationals. Indeed.
And so when is Australian nationals? Will be towards the end of this year?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so kind of everything's working towards that one, all these international competitions in aid of that effort, yeah?
For sure, yeah.
And then the Oceanic, and then the Olympics.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. It's quite an effort to just get there, right? So.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge commitment to decide that you want to go for this. You can't just go for the Olympics half-arse. Yeah. It's like, this is what I want to do. I have to give it 100%. Otherwise, it's a waste of time and money. Like, I want to give this 100%. And if I don't make it, I don't make it. But I've had this huge journey along the way of, giving it my all and really discovering my boundaries and my limits. And I'm really excited for that and having that journey. And if I make it, then it's a whole nother journey after that. Like, I can't even imagine how good it's going to be. But yeah, and if I hadn't done that, I would really regret it, I think. So that was my decision.
So how do you see your future with climbing, like beyond after 2020?
I definitely still want to do some competitions overseas and do some World Cups here and there, because I still want to make semi-finals, and if that doesn't happen this year, I would like to make that happen, and maybe even a finals one day. But I really want to focus some more on outdoor climbing. It's a real passion of mine, which I've had to put aside for a little while now, just because whenever I'm at home it's summer, and summer in Queensland is not ideal for climbing. So yeah, I've kind of put it aside, and all my training has to really be indoors if I want it to be the most specific I can. And so yeah, I'd like to come back to that and do some more projecting outdoors and project hard routes, travel, and be a climbing bum for a bit, or I don't know, do some study as well at some point. Yeah,
all those other things to do with life.
Bit of balance. Yeah. I've been doing climbing for a while now, so I'd like to try some other things.
That's it. Thanks to Lucy, who patiently answered my questions and put up with some technical difficulties, i.e. 20 minutes of where I forgot to push the record button and she had to answer all the questions again for a second time. Sorry about that, Lucy. Since recording, Lucy's made it onto the 2019 Australian sport climbing team for all 3 disciplines, lead, bouldering and speed. Congratulations, Lucy. That's another step towards her goal of making it to the Olympics. If you do want to follow her journey, she has profiles on Instagram and Facebook, and you can head over there and follow her. I'll include some links on thelayback.com to help you find them. Now, wherever you're headed today, may that niggle in your finger just turn out to be a niggle. May you be shielded from any unwanted beta spray. And may the only problems in your life be boulders. For those of you still with us, it's that time of the year at the moment. We're headed into winter and conditions are getting better. But it is cold and flu season. I want to take us out with this little Australian cultural tidbit that's kind of in reference to Lucy's performance in 2014 at the Lead Championships, where she won with a head cold. I think we need to take her lead and just suck it up and soldier on.
Cold.
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 Ooh, and there's people depending on you.
Soldier on, soldier on, soldier on with Codrill, soldier on, soldier on, soldier on with Codrill, soldier on, you know you're winning.